Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep on something pretty incredible, I think,
Yeah.
the octopus.
Definitely.
And to be more precise,
Yeah.
we're diving into the bizarre biology of the octopus.
Yes, we are, and I'm so excited to talk about this tonight.
Yeah, this is one of those creatures where I think a lot of people have kind of a surface level appreciation for just how strange they are.
Yes.
But we're gonna go deep today
Absolutely.
on just how strange and wonderful they are.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's almost like when you think about extraterrestrial life and you think about like what could be out there.
Yeah.
The octopus is kind of the closest thing that we have to that on Earth.
Yeah, and for you listening,
Yeah.
it is kind of the closest thing we've got to like an
Yes.
alien intelligence right here on Earth.
Yeah.
And to kind of lay the groundwork a little bit for you listening.
Yeah.
These aren't just any sea creatures. These are cephalopods,
Yes.
which makes them some of the most intelligent and mobile invertebrates out there.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to get into their evolution in a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think it's important for you to kind of keep that in mind as we go.
Yeah.
This is a very ancient and successful lineage.
Yeah, and I mean, the variety of octopus species out there is just staggering.
It really is. You have everything from these tiny little guys that can fit on the tip of your finger,
Right.
to these massive creatures like the giant Pacific octopus,
Mm.
which can have an arm span of over 10 feet,
Right.
and they've got all these different adaptations. Some of them have venom.
Right.
Some of them have these incredible color changing abilities.
Right.
So we're going to get into all of that.
Yeah, so for this deep dive,
Yeah.
I think there's a few core questions we want to address.
Absolutely.
And the first one is, how on earth
Yeah.
did the octopus become so biologically intricate? And the second one is just, how intelligent are they?
Yeah.
This creature that's so unlike us.
Right.
And I think maybe the most interesting question for you listening is, what can their unique existence teach us about the very nature of our own minds?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that really gets me excited about octopuses is just how different they are
Yeah.
from us,
Yeah.
and yet they've evolved this incredible intelligence.
Right.
And so it really challenges our assumptions about what intelligence is and how it can arise.
Yeah. And to kind of set the stage here,
Yeah.
we should talk about just how ancient these creatures are.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, the fossil record shows that cephalopods emerged over 500 million years ago.
That's right.
I mean, that's long before fish.
Yeah. Long before dinosaurs, mammals, you name it. Yeah. They were around.
Yeah. So for you listening, that's like
Yeah.
way back.
Way back. And it's fascinating to think about what their early ancestors were like.
Yeah.
Because they were much more similar to other mollusks that you might be familiar with. Things like snails and clams.
Right.
They were small. They had shells.
Right.
Generally pretty slow moving.
Right.
Soft bodied, but with that hard protective exterior.
Right. So then we fast forward a bit.
Yeah.
And around 140 million years ago,
Right.
something really interesting happens.
Yeah.
In the octopus lineage,
Yeah.
they ditch the shell.
They ditched the shell, and that's a huge turning point
It's huge.
for them. Because on the one hand,
Yeah.
it makes them much more vulnerable.
Right.
Right? They don't have that hard exterior for protection anymore.
Right.
But on the other hand, it unlocks this incredible agility,
Yeah.
flexibility.
Yeah. And that soft body that they've got now, with really the exception of their beak,
Right.
allows them to squeeze into these ridiculously small spaces.
Yeah, and it's often said that if an octopus can fit its beak through a space,
Yeah.
it can fit its whole body through that space.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're trying to picture that, I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's a huge survival advantage when you're trying to escape
Oh, absolutely.
predators like sharks
Yeah.
and dolphins.
Especially when you consider that a lot of octopuses live in environments like coral reefs,
Right.
which are full of little nooks and crannies.
Right.
So they can just squeeze into those spaces and disappear.
Right. And their defenses don't stop there, do they?
No, not at all. I mean, they have this incredible camouflage.
Yeah.
And it's really one of the most sophisticated examples of camouflage in the entire animal kingdom.
Yeah, and to really understand it, I think we need to break down
Yeah,
how it works.
absolutely.
And for them, it all relies on these specialized skin cells
Right.
called chromatophores.
chromatophores, yeah. And I always kind of picture these like tiny little freckles all over their skin.
Yeah.
But instead of just containing pigment, they actually contain these little sacs of colored dye.
Right.
Black, red, or yellow.
And each one of those little sacs is surrounded by radial muscles.
Exactly. So when those muscles contract,
Yeah.
they stretch the pigment sac,
Yeah.
making the color appear brighter and more vibrant.
Yeah. And by controlling
Yeah,
which chromatophores are contracted or expanded,
exactly.
they can create this incredible array of patterns.
That's amazing.
Bands, stripes, spots.
It's like having a living, breathing Etch-a-Sketch on their skin.
Right. It's like they can just instantly
Yeah,
change their appearance.
yeah, and it's not just about the color.
Right.
They can also change the texture of their skin.
Yeah. They really go all out.
They do, yeah. They have these structures called papillae.
Papillae.
Yeah,
Go.
and these can rise and fall, creating ridges and bumps on their skin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so not only can they match the color of their surroundings,
Right.
but they can also match the texture.
They can really disappear.
They can really disappear into the background.
So whatever's around them.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and just the speed
Yeah.
at which they can do all of this is mind-boggling.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, we're talking reaction times of up to 200 milliseconds.
That's faster than you can blink.
Yeah, I mean, imagine trying to spot something that can change its entire appearance in the blink of an eye.
You never see it coming.
Yeah,
And what's really interesting here
yeah.
is that for a long time, scientists thought that octopuses were colorful. So it was this kind of paradox.
Yeah, how do they?
Right, how do they match these colors?
Right,
If they can't even see them.
if they can't even see them. Yeah,
And it turns out
yeah,
they have this really amazing adaptation.
yeah.
In 2015, researchers discovered that octopus skin itself is sensitive to light.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So even when it's detached from the body,
Right.
it can respond to light
Really?
and change the shape of its chromatophores.
No. So it's like they can see
It's like they can see
with their skin.
with their skin. Yeah. It's incredible.
That's wild.
It's like their entire body is a sensory organ for light.
So then how do they control
Yeah.
all of these rapid changes?
So it's different from other color-changing animals,
Okay.
like chameleons, for example.
Right.
Chameleons rely on hormonal control,
Okay.
which is a much slower process
Okay.
because hormones have to circulate to the bloodstream.
Right.
But octopuses have neural control over their chromatophores.
Oh, wow. So it's like a direct connection?
There's a direct connection.
Yeah.
So it's like lightning fast.
Wow.
And, some researchers even speculate
Yeah.
that these color changes might be both voluntary and involuntary,
Interesting.
kind of like breathing or blinking.
Yeah.
Something that they can consciously control,
Right.
but also happens automatically.
Okay. So we've got this incredibly adaptable physical form and these amazing defense mechanisms. But where the octopus really shines is its intelligence.
Absolutely.
And I think we should start by talking about their nervous system.
Yeah, because it's very different
It's very unusual.
from ours.
Yeah.
So the common octopus has around 500 million neurons.
Okay.
Now that's a lot less than our 100 billion,
Right.
but it's significantly more than most other invertebrates.
Right.
Snails, for example, only have about 20,000.
Wow. Okay.
So octopuses are actually in the same ballpark as many vertebrates.
Wow. So like cats and dogs.
Yeah, cats, dogs, parrots, things like that.
Okay.
So that should give you some perspective
Yeah.
on just how complex their nervous system is.
Yeah. And the other really interesting thing is where those neurons are located.
Exactly. Yeah, so only about a third of their neurons are in their central brain. The vast majority are actually distributed throughout their 8 arms.
So 2/3.
2/3 of their neurons are in their arms.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is crazy.
So essentially, their arms can think for themselves.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And we've known for a while
Yeah.
that severed octopus arms can still respond to stimuli,
Right.
even an hour after they've been separated from the body.
That's wild.
It's wild, yeah.
And there's been some recent research
There has.
that's really shedding light on this.
Yeah.
And one study in particular that I thought was fascinating was they did this video modeling
Right.
where they tracked the movements of the octopus's arms.
As they were exploring objects
Yeah.
and searching for food.
Right.
And what they found was that some environmental information
Yeah.
actually bypasses the central brain entirely.
Wow.
Yeah. So the suckers on the arms
Okay.
can essentially process information themselves.
Wow.
which allows for this really rapid
Yeah.
analysis of their surroundings.
So it's like each arm has its own little brain.
It's kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still not fully understood
Right.
how all of this works. But it's clear that octopuses have this very distributed intelligence.
Yeah. So for you listening, I mean, just try to imagine that for a second.
Yeah.
Like if each of your fingers
Yeah.
had a tiny brain that could figure out how to grasp something
Before you even knew what it was.
before your main brain even knew.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And despite this very different neurological setup,
Right.
the intelligence that has evolved in octopuses
Yeah.
is really remarkable.
It's remarkable.
It rivals that of many vertebrates.
Yeah. And that brings us back to this idea of
Yes.
them being like this alien intelligence.
Yeah, because it represents this truly independent
Yeah.
evolution of intelligence
Yeah.
on our planet.
And if we go back
Yeah.
on the evolutionary tree,
Yeah.
the split between vertebrates
Right.
and cephalopods
Right.
happened something like 600 million years ago.
That's
And our common ancestor back then
Yeah.
was likely a very simple flatworm.
Yeah, probably something very simple.
Yeah, so the complex cognition that we see in both groups
Right.
arose completely separately.
Completely separately, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is just amazing to think about.
And that makes studying octopus intelligence so valuable.
Absolutely.
But it also highlights how difficult it is
Yes.
to define and measure intelligence
Yeah.
in a creature that's so unlike us.
Especially because
Yeah,
our typical definitions of intelligence
right,
revolve around things like abstract thinking,
right,
communication, problem solving, memory planning.
right. And those are all very human-centric
Very human-centric.
ways of thinking about intelligence.
And you can't exactly give an octopus an IQ test.
Right, you can't.
So we have to rely on observing their behavior.
Right, and that's where the work of people like Jennifer Mather
Yes.
becomes so insightful.
Jennifer Mather is a professor of psychology who's done a lot of really fascinating research
Right.
on octopus intelligence.
Okay.
And her work has shown that they're proficient
Yeah.
in a wide range of learning tasks.
Yeah.
Short-term memory, long-term memory, spatial memory,
Right.
object perception.
Right.
But one of the things that I think is most striking
Yeah.
is the evidence for planning
Yeah.
in octopus.
And the classic example of that
Yeah.
is the coconut carrying octopus.
Yes, the coconut carrying octopus.
Can you tell us about that for our listener?
Yeah, so these octopuses
Yeah.
have been observed collecting discarded coconut halves
Okay.
and carrying them around
Yeah.
to areas where there's no natural shelter.
Okay.
And when they feel threatened or they want to rest,
Yeah.
they'll actually assemble the coconut halves
Wow.
around themselves.
Like a little shelter.
a little shelter, yeah,
Wow.
for protection.
So they're not just using tools,
Right.
they're planning ahead.
They're planning ahead.
Yep.
They're thinking, I might need this later,
Yeah.
so I'm going to carry it with me.
Yeah.
And some scientists consider this
Yeah.
to be an example of composite tool use,
Right.
which means using two different parts
Yeah.
to create a functional tool.
And that's something that we used to think
Right.
was pretty much limited to humans.
Yeah,
Humans.
some primates.
Some primates and certain birds.
Yeah,
But to see it in an octopus
Yeah.
is really remarkable.
and it's not just tool use.
Right.
They also have these really impressive memory skills.
They do.
They can even distinguish between individual humans.
Yeah, that's right. Which is crazy. It is crazy. So Jennifer Mather's studies have shown
Yeah,
that they can tell the difference between different people,
even when they're wearing the same clothes.
even when they're wearing the same clothes. So it suggests that they're recognizing some kind of individual characteristics.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they also exhibit these playful behaviors,
They do.
which is kind of unexpected
It is unexpected.
for a solitary creature.
Yeah, because play is often linked
Yeah.
to social development in animals that live in groups.
Right. So why would a solitary creature,
Right.
like an octopus,
Yeah.
exhibit play?
Well, it's a good question.
Yeah.
One study that I thought was really interesting
Yeah.
was they had these octopuses in tanks,
Okay.
and they weren't really doing much.
Okay.
And they had a pill bottle
Okay.
floating on the surface of the water,
Okay.
and the pill bottle was being moved around
Yeah.
by the water intake current.
Okay.
And some of the octopuses started shooting jets of water at the pill bottle
Oh, wow.
to push it back towards the current
So they could play with it again?
so they could play with it again. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
So they're like creating their own little game.
It seems like it, yeah.
Yeah.
And they would do this repeatedly, even though they were well-fed and safe.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they were doing it for any kind of survival reason.
Right.
It seemed like they were just doing it for fun.
Wow. That's incredible.
It is incredible,
Yeah.
and it makes us rethink
Yeah.
why animals play.
Yeah.
You know, because in social species,
Yeah.
play often serves functions,
Right.
like establishing social hierarchies,
Right.
learning social rules,
Right.
bonding.
Right.
But octopuses are largely solitary.
Right.
So it suggests that play might serve other purposes,
Yeah.
maybe related to exploration,
Okay.
learning about their environment, or
Yeah.
just providing some form of cognitive stimulation,
Right.
you know, to keep their very active brains engaged.
Yeah, and this really challenges this
Yeah.
idea that intelligence primarily evolved
Right.
due to social needs,
Right.
which is the social intelligence hypothesis.
Yes, the social intelligence hypothesis.
And that's the idea that
Yeah.
the demands of group living, it's like cooperation.
Yeah, cooperation, deception,
Yeah.
maintaining social bonds,
Right.
drove the evolution of larger, more complex brains.
Right.
And that's often used to explain
Yeah.
the complex cognition that we see in social mammals,
Right.
like primates, for example.
Right, but that doesn't really explain
Does it really
the
explain
octopus.
the octopus?
Yeah.
Because they're not social.
Right.
They're largely solitary.
So how do we account for their intelligence then?
So there's this other hypothesis,
Okay.
the ecological intelligence hypothesis.
Okay.
And this theory suggests
Yeah.
that complex cognition evolved
Yeah.
to meet the challenges of an animal's environment.
Okay.
So things like finding food,
Okay.
evading predators,
Okay.
competing with others.
Right.
And when you think about the octopus,
Yeah.
losing its shell 140 million years ago,
Right.
they suddenly face this intense predation pressure.
Right. Because they lost their armor.
Exactly. They lost their armor. So they had to find other ways to survive.
Right.
And one of those ways
Yeah.
might have been to become really intelligent,
Right.
to outsmart their predators.
Yeah, let's mark their predators.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's possible
Yeah.
that the loss of their shell
Yeah.
actually drove
Yeah.
the evolution of their sophisticated intelligence.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And it suggests that,
Yeah.
you know, there isn't just one pathway
Right.
to complex thought. There might be many different ways
Yeah.
that intelligence can evolve.
So the octopus is like this living example
Yeah.
of an alternate intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it challenges our very human-centric view
Yeah.
of what intelligence is
Yeah.
and how it can arise.
And as different as they are from us,
Yeah.
you know, they've shared this planet
Yeah.
and its oceans with us
Yeah. For hundreds of millions of years.
for hundreds of millions of years.
They're not true aliens.
Right.
They're more like
Distant relatives.
distant relatives. Yeah.
Yeah.
In this grand evolutionary experiment of
Yeah.
life on Earth.
And it all started way back in the Ordovician period,
That's right.
about 500 million years ago,
About 500 million years ago.
when armored cephalopods
Yeah.
dominated the oceans.
Yeah, they were the kings of the seas
Wow.
for a very long time.
So it's quite a journey from those ancient armored cephalopods
Yeah.
to the soft-bodied masters of disguise
Yeah.
we have today.
It really is remarkable.
So as we surface
Yeah.
from this deep dive into
Yeah.
the world of the octopus,
Yeah.
I'd like to leave you listening. Final thought.
Absolutely.
Consider
Yeah.
how this independent evolution
Yeah.
of such complex cognition in a
Yeah.
creature so different from us
Yeah.
might challenge your fundamental assumptions
Yeah.
about intelligence
Yeah.
and the conditions necessary for its development,
Yeah.
both here on Earth. Yeah,
And potentially elsewhere in the universe.
absolutely.
And young, what other forms of intelligence
Yeah.
might exist out there
Yeah.
that we haven't recognized?
Yeah, because they don't fit
Yeah.
our preconceived notions.
Because they don't fit into our
Yeah.
human-centric way of looking at things.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a truly mind-bending question.
It is.
to ponder.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, thank you for joining us
Yeah, thanks for having me.
on this deep dive
This was fun.
into the octopus.
It was great.
Yeah.
I love talking about octopuses. Me too. They're fascinating.
They are fascinating creatures.
Yeah, and I think there's still so much that we don't know about.
Yeah, and hopefully this deep dive
Yeah.
has given you listening
Yeah.
a little bit more to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe even inspired you
Yeah.
to learn more.
To learn more about these amazing amazing creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Bye.